This is my Friday video series where I just ramble about, sort of like Boogie's rambling series. Now, yesterday I was thinking about the whole mortality, salience, and awareness thing, and an interview I saw with Robert Greene, in which he says thinking about one's own mortality seriously can lead to all types of great wisdom and stuff like that. And this will link up to another point I'm going to make later in the video about existentialism, but some sort of wisdom. And I, as a layman, have read up on this, so I'm not an expert. This is just some observations and my own personal experience of this. Is that very little good can come of this. Because think about this. When you die, in our secular sense, it's just the end. All your hopes, dreams, no do-overs, nothing. And one of the only good things to come of this is you become more creative. Wow! I can be a great artist, a great painter, a better painter, a better novelist, so on and so forth. But since all of us are going to have that, or the symbolic immortality that comes with that, what are we to do with life? Since we're not all going to be remembered 10,000 years from now. It's like Dave Chappelle once said, it's like working your whole life for something and then having it come to nothing. And we talk about this very great, I apologize, there's some other points I wanted to get to first. And if you look at all the negatives associated with mortality salience, as shown in terror management theory, we become less moral, less outstanding human beings, more racist, more bigoted, more homophobic. All the things philosophers say should be the opposite. One wonders why this advice is even given to people. Given all the negatives and the only positive being you become a bit more creative, as far as I can tell. And there's recently a book came out from Rachel Menzies, I apologize if I'm butchering your name, called Mortals, Mortals, in which she explores this idea. Well, I haven't read it, but the first excerpt talks about how we know that we're gonna die. The dog doesn't know about it, they just live. And I don't know, I haven't read the book, I don't know if it's out in South Africa, but it's sort of a book on, as far as I can tell, about terror management theory. I wonder how much this book differs from Sheldon Solomon's book, The Worm at the Core. And I spoke earlier about the amoral implications of terror management theory. Of terror management theory. And there's a documentary called Flight from Death, where Sheldon Solomon talks about this, about how one of the defenses against death anxiety is high self-esteem. Now we can put ourselves in a high self-esteem in culturally sanctioned ways, like winning a sporting event or an academic competition, using you're better than anybody else. But the problem is there's also a lot of negative connotations, like genocide, racism, bigotry, homophobia. I think I've stated those before. Like I say, this is just a rambling series. And I'm wondering, why do you think give this advice to people? Why? It seems terrible with advice. Now, my first experience with seriously contemplating my own mortality was, and I'm getting to this now, this links up with my second point, was at the end of high school. I thought, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to work, and then just die. And then all my effort would have been for nothing. I had that thought for about a few seconds. The next year, I took a gap year, I got a stomach infection. the middle part of my body became incredibly hot and my extremities became incredibly cold. And I thought, this is it. And I heard that's what happens in the dying, when people die. And that led me to a massive existential crisis, since I really don't know if there's afterlife. That was for about 3 months, and I got over it because I had to start university in like a few months' time. I couldn't sit there going, what's the point of life with exams and other practical things? The other time was after I got my chronic illness diagnosis and was put on some same stomach infection medication. Same thing happened. And since then, since I don't have a job or anything to preoccupy my mind, I've been having a massive existential crisis. And this has caused me to develop depression. I used to be a very happy, upbeat kind of guy, but and this has led to me having this existential dread. Because since we live in this very secular world, we don't really have that assurance of an afterlife. So the feeling becomes, okay, what's the point of doing anything anyway if I'm just going to die? It renders anything meaningless. Because you can see if you're going to do something forever, that it can have some sort of meaning, because you're going to be doing it for infinity. So might as well enjoy it. But then I also had the thought of, who wants to live on forever? And I'm on antidepressants now. Sorry. And the other day, on the depression subreddit, there was a 16-year-old talking about his nihilism he has, and how that led to him developing full-blown depression. Like the not wanting to get out of bed, the not wanting to eat, the lack of motivation. And this is all because of our secular viewpoint of life and death. Now this leads to my second point. I see on apologies with that, these jump pauses, there are dogs playing in the background. Since I say this is just a rambling thing, I will become better as time goes on, hopefully. Now, where was I? Oh yes, the teenager with depression. Now this atheist has got full-blown depression. Not wanting to eat, not wanting to get out of bed, lack of motivation to do things. And one wonders, how are we going to deal with this psychologically? Because these things were normally attributed with religion. And it's easy to see why. Like I said, if you believe there's a God that has your back and your best interests at heart, it's easy to believe that your life has meaning and purpose to it. But I'll come back to this point later. Now this comes up with my second point. One of the reasons people say you should think about your mortality seriously is because you only have a limited time here on earth, so you better use it wisely. And I've seen a lot of young people on the existential crisis subreddit having an existential crisis or a quarter life crisis. Now apparently these things are becoming more and more common. According to a Psychology Today article, the reason for this is because our IQs have been going up, and all the other variables that we want from humans have gone up. Creativity, empathy, so on and so forth. Now, here's the thing. Jean-Paul Sartre talked about the curse of freedom. We have so many choices to make. We are paralyzed by it. And psychologists call this the paradox of choice. You have way too many choices to make, and you don't know which one you want to make. That is the world we live in now. Many atheists argue, why do people like this? Why is religion so appealing because of this? Well, if you believe there's a Christian God, at least in the Christian sense, the Judeo-Christian deity, I don't know about the other religions, I can't speak to them. This is just one observation from one religion. If you believe in a Christian God, um, you will have your path set out for you. You don't need to have the paradox of choice or the Jean-Paul Sartre, the terrors of freedom. And I see this on the subreddit quite a lot. This usually happens in your 50s or midlife crisis. And this explains why so many young people are becoming more depressed. They don't know what to do with their lives. We have this limited amount of time and we have to focus what we want to achieve. But in doing so, we have other things that we're not doing and we regret not doing this. It's like this famous experiment of ice cream. When you have three things you can choose from, you're happy because you know what the other two taste like. But if you have 32, your brain is doing a cost benefit and it's saying, I'm missing out on all these other possibilities. What? Then your brain becomes paralyzed. Why am I not getting Oreo flavor, for example, rather than vanilla? Because you have all these choices that you didn't know you had. Now, for the young people out there, I'm still struggling with this. So I don't really have an answer for the second question. My only observation is that from a psychiatric and psychological point, this is as a layman, they are going to have to deal with these problems pretty quickly, since we live in a very nihilistical and very nihilistic society because of our secularization of it. Religious societies in the past apparently didn't have these problems because, well, they were religious. And this sort of solves many of the problems, as I've stated earlier. But we can't go back to those reassurances. You can see where the problem is. So I don't know what the answer is. This is just an observation of the problems. I am in the sports field. I did do sports science degree, and many people wonder why athletes in their own lives they had it all. Keyword had. They're not in the sports field playing the sport, having people cheer them on, go, yes, you can do it. They retired. Now what? So you're gonna have to deal with these problems. And I don't know if this is something strange I've noticed, but just in my layman's research, and I will be sending this to Dr. Rachel Menzies, since I mentioned her earlier in the video, and I have a question for her now, and she is Australian. Dr. Rachel, I don't know if you know if you're a big fan of rugby, both league and union, but from what I can tell, the suicide rate is much higher in the league code than in the union code. But the union code is seen as more violent, more CTEs and stuff like that. Do you have any hypothesis as to why? And do you have any solutions to this existential problems that we are facing? Because these used to, as far as I can tell, occur in middle age. Because there's this in late years. There's this funny story. Now there's this video of the Atlantic of a 97-year-old philosopher was getting to the end of his life, obviously, and he says in the video that he was struggling to find meaning of it all, given the fact that now it's just going to come to an end. He was very verbose about it, very arrogant. He even wrote a book, You Shouldn't Fear Death because there's nothing to fear, there's nothing there. But even at the end, he was still having existential problems and death anxiety. So, do you have any coping skills and mechanisms for this? I'm just wondering. Thank you.